that goes against some sort of spiritual moral code. And I think that's why they're justifying this stuff by slipping in more and more of these hints in Hollywood movies, because most people aren't paying attention anyway. So, there you go.
Well, it's very interesting, that's for sure, all this end time stuff. And they like promoting it because, again, it helps them fulfill their agenda. And this is nothing new. There have been people fear-mongering about the end times for hundreds and hundreds of years. So there you have it. But let's go on to the next question. Also, let me throw my email address in case anybody else wants to email in with a question. It's lrogers@oraclebroadcasting.com. LROGERS@oraclebroadcasting.com. Feel free to email in. We got 15 minutes left in the show, so if you want to squeeze in an email, feel free to shoot one over, and we'll try to answer the questions they have. And I have our email here dealing with Adnan Khashoggi. And let me read this one. Is there absolute proof Adnan Khashoggi started or owns GCN? There are articles that say he does not. Daniel Hopsinker from Mad Cow, well, whatever that is, said there were two companies with the same name, one in Minnesota and one in Florida. I called GCN, and they said that Ted Anderson owns it. This is the new counterintelligence method, counterclaims with different articles that conflict. Also, are you aware that Adnan Khashoggi started Barrick Gold in Canada, that George H.W. Bush was involved in and helped give them rights to mine in America? Thanks, and those are the questions. As far as Barrick Gold, I wasn't aware that Khashoggi was affiliated with that, but he has been tied in with business interests. So, Josh, you can confirm that?
Yeah. That's absolutely true. I've come across that in my research recently, yes.
Okay, excellent. And as far as Khashoggi's links to GCN, now I haven't done as much research into this. I can't confirm this, but I know, Josh, you've done more research into this. I know that Khashoggi had a link to this author. I think it was, what was that book? Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus?
Yeah.
The author of that.
John Gray. Gray.
Okay. Would you care to elaborate on that and maybe answer this guy's question?
Absolutely. That was the big kind of a moment for me, because I was in the same spot this guy's at in my research. I had come across the exact same things that he just named, and I was trying to find this connection because there was all these front groups, both in Florida and Minnesota, with the name Genesis Intermedia, Genesis Airplanes, just on and on and on with these names Genesis in it. And I knew that Khashoggi had been involved in all of these other Genesis named companies, many of which were based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which coincidentally enough is exactly the same place where Genesis Communications Radio Network is located at. And so I kept coming up into brick walls and kept finding stuff. And then I found this quote where John Gray, who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, had said that Khashoggi had ripped him off on his publishing deal and owed him a bunch of money when he had put out that book on his Genesis Intermedia label. And, of course, you can get one of the copies of that book, and it has Genesis Intermedia label on there, and you can confirm that Khashoggi was a part of that. And then, lo and behold, what I found was interesting was the fact that you had John Gray, who has been a guest on the Alex Jones Show and is listed as one of the celebrity members of the 9/11 Truth Movement. So to have had him be on with Alex Jones and had him been a member of the 9/11 Truth community, as well as a connection with Adnan Khashoggi, considering there's, 10 or 15 front groups that have been started out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, that he has been associated with, as well as Khashoggi's association with Larry Pratt and Pat Buchanan, both who have been featured guests and on various GCN shows through the years. He was the primary guy who was providing the arms during Iran-Contra when both Larry Pratt and Pat Buchanan, who Alex Jones worked on his 96 campaign, on the campaign of Pat Buchanan, you had both these guys working for the Council on Inter-American Security, and they were funneling money between the United States and South America for the Contras. So that whole connection with the front companies in Minneapolis, all with the name Genesis Intermedia, Genesis, there was one that was like Genesis something communications, and then you had all these different ones. Absolutely. I think where there's smoke, there's fire. And the John Gray connection, to me, really seals the deal on that.
It's certainly something to look into, that's for sure. And I hope that answers the listener's question. Now, obviously, Adnan Khashoggi, a very interesting figure, especially when you look at his ties to Iran-Contra. He was a very high-level figure within that whole system. And, of course, we know that the Council for National Policy, a lot of their membership had key roles to play in the Iran-Contra affair. So,
I got another thing. This is another interesting thing that I'll throw out there on that subject. Adana Khashoggi always seems to be connected with all sorts of rock stars and people in Hollywood and entertainment, and I find that
the Queen song, right?
Another very interesting connection with how Alex Jones has on these different musical guests and celebrities. Because we know that the both the Hollywood and the music industry have been controlled by the mafia and the mob and the Vatican for years and years and years. And yeah, the Queen did write a song about partying on Adana Khashoggi's ship. I was watching an interview with one of my favorite drummers, Stuart Copeland from the Police, recently, and I was just kind of decompressing, taking some downtime, watching this interview, and I was blown away, Lee, because it always happens when I'm not looking for info, I get it. And Stuart Copeland, the drummer for the Police, was talking about he did this video in the 1980s called The Rhythmatist, and he went to Africa and traveled to Africa to get all these different African rhythms. And they did this thing where they set up his drum set in the middle of a cage, and while he's playing, they let these tigers come out at the cage, and it was just we're just ravaging the cage. And he was talking about where he shot this at in this interview, and he said, "Yeah, we were at this guy's ranch in Africa. He's a Khashoggi. He's filthy rich, and here we are, filming this." And I was like, my goodness. And then you find out that Stuart Copeland's father, and this has come out in declassified CIA and FBI documents over the past couple of years, was a member of the OSS, then a founding member of the CIA, along with many founding members of the CIA, who was also, there were all the heads of the CIA that came on the OSS were Sovereign Military Order of Malta. So, and then I found another interview, one of our listeners found an interview where Stuart Copeland talked about when he was in school, and because he lived over in the Middle East and he lived in Lebanon and all these different places as a child, because his mother was MI6 and his father was OSS and CIA. And Stuart Copeland talked about when he was in school, he went to school with this kid named Osama bin Laden. So there you have the connection, Osama bin Laden. There you have the connection with Stuart Copeland, Adana Khashoggi, music movie stars, GCN, how GCN seems to be getting all these music stars on the Alex Jones show. That's another interesting tie-in I wanted to throw out there for the listener.
That's interesting. Well, hope that answers the question fully. I'll have to look into that stuff. That's fascinating. What was this guy's name? Copeland?
Yeah, Stuart Copeland.
Stuart Copeland.
He's the drummer for the Police with Sting. He's one of my favorite drummers.
Okay.
Cool. And it's funny because his brother started a record label called IRS Records.
And IRS Records, huh?
And he discovered REM, the band REM. Yeah, and he had IRS Records. They had CIA booking and promotion. They named it all after government agencies. Yeah, it's fascinating. There was mainstream news documents that came out about how his dad was a spy and his mom worked for MI6 and he was in the OSS. It's fascinating stuff, man.
Yeah, well, of course, there's a lot of researchers that believe that the Beatles had links back to British intelligence.
Oh, of course. Yeah, Tavistock.
Yes. So very interesting stuff there. And that's a whole show in of itself. We go on and on. Another question here from the listeners. Can you two do a quick overview of HR 1955? Maybe some research tips. Thanks, guys. That's from John. I guess I can field that one real quick. Then I'll push over to you, Josh. HR 1955, basically, it was this bill that was passed in the U.S. House of Representatives a few years back. It never actually got fully implemented, never got signed into law, but you had 404 people in the U.S. House of Representatives vote in favor of this bill. And basically, the bill was this piece of legislation that was called the Violent Radicalization and Homegrown Terrorism Prevention Act. It was something along those lines. Forgive me if I don't remember it exactly. But basically what it did is that it set up a government apparatus as a way to study how to deal with, quote unquote, these people who have become homegrown terrorists or have adopted ideologies in which they have become radicalized. And with the definitions of what a homegrown terrorist is or what a violent radical is very vague as to how they define in the bill. So essentially, it's basically a bill that was set up to give the government the authority and the ability to research how they can adequately deal with thought criminals, with people who adopt ideologies that the government deems to be unacceptable. So you can look this up, look up HR 1955, look up Thought Crimes Bill, and you can probably come across my research on it, my analysis. It's a horrible piece of legislation. Thankfully, it never got passed. But the thing is, they were actually implementing parts of that bill anyway within the executive branch, which is just ridiculous. But that's what they do nowadays anyway. It doesn't matter if a bill is passed or a law is signed. It doesn't matter. They just do pretty much whatever they want. And they just find an excuse to do it. But Josh,
Yeah,
have any
and
further thoughts on HR 1955?
Yeah, I was going to say, don't overlook the fact that a lot of times these bills get put out for the psychological operation aspect of it. A lot of times they put these bills out that they know aren't going to get to pass, and they try to get a reaction. I think HR 1955 was a classic example of them trying to go to reaction out of the American people and trying to see how many people would want to stand up in an armed conflict if they did pass this. So I think that oftentimes is a part of the overall plan. And as you said, Lee, then they just slowly start implementing this stuff anyway, and it doesn't matter. But I think HR 1955 coinciding with Project Megiddo, which I talk about in the Secret Volume 1, which was a Y2K plan pretty much of the same thing, where they were going to start rounding up people they thought were believed in a New World Order takeover. They really are trying to acclimate us and see how much we'll take, and I think it's going to continue to increase in that operation. Do we have another question before we run out of time here?
Yeah, let's see if we have any others. I think you're right on HR 1955 in retrospect, because they never passed that thing. They never signed it into law. It just passed the House. They got their reaction, and nothing else came of it. But yeah, I mean, they did implement parts of it. There's no denying that with the university system. I think that's it for emails, which is fine because we have only, like a few minutes left?
Yeah, just a couple minutes.
Okay, so I guess that's it for emails. Well, thank you to everybody who sent an email in and everybody who contributed. Fun. Yeah, that was great. We'll definitely have to do that in the future. Well, Josh, since we got a couple minutes left, is there anything that you feel is important that you want to share with the audience before we get going and part ways?
I just want to say that as we're wrapping up 2010 here and we're going on into 2011, I want to say that I think that we're entering into a new decade now, and I think that it's important that all of us have our mentalities prepared. And have everything not just physically prepared and all that stuff and making preparations, but also mentally, and be ready to adapt to these changes that are going to be happening in our world. Adaptation does not mean conforming to a system, but I think if we all learn how to adapt to the coming changes, we're going to have a much better chance of surviving this and one day being able to get out the people that are in the power structure and creating a world for ourselves that doesn't need a hierarchy. And I think that is ultimately the goal of humanity. But again, everybody can check me out at theglobalreality.com. We're going to be taking the show back to 11 to 2 next Monday. And people can also, if they want to go and pre-order copies of The Seek Right Volume 2, it'll be coming out at the end of next month. All those people are going to get extra bonuses and extra discs in their packages that nobody else is going to get. So they can do that as well at theglobalreality.com. And Lee, it's always a pleasure to be with you, man. I look forward to kicking some more butt with you in 2011.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll bring it back up on next month in January after I'm sure we're going to see any number of crazy things happen.
Yeah, it's going to get interesting.
It sure will be. All right. Well, that's pretty much it for the show. Josh, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. Thanks a lot.
All right. Take care. All right. Well, there you go. Well, folks, that's it for the show. I'm about gassed. It's been a long show, but I think we put out a lot of good information. Thanks again for tuning in. I will be back again tomorrow. You can check out my website at roguegovernment.com. All the news and information that came out today, you can find up on that website. And I'll try to get into more of the news and info that came out today and will come out tomorrow on tomorrow's show. So thank you for tuning in, and we're going to sign off, but I'll see you all tomorrow.